The alarm clock rang at exactly 5:30 in the morning. Marion Thorne didn't need to reach for the button. Her hand found it in the dark as usual. 15 years of the same morning had made the movement automatic. For 15 years, she had been waking up 30 minutes earlier than necessary to enjoy the silence before a day filled with people and conversation. Marion turned on her desk lamp and looked around her room, small but cozy, with photographs on the walls and an antique dresser she had inherited from her grandmother. The light fell on a stack of quarterly reports she had taken home for the weekend. Work had once again invaded her personal space, but Marion had long since come to terms with the fact that the boundaries between her office and her home were blurred beyond recognition. Getting out of bed, she went to the kitchen and turned on the coffee maker. The quiet bubbling and the smell of fresh coffee were always the most pleasant part of her morning. Marion glanced at the clock. 5:45 a.m., 15 more minutes before she had to start getting ready for work. 15 minutes of silence. The sound of the phone came from the bedroom, an early message. Marion sighed and went to check it. "Don't forget family dinner tonight. Dad wants to make his signature lasagna. Don't be late like last time." The message from her mother, Vivian, was brief and to the point, with no greeting or question about how her daughter was doing. Marion put her phone on silent and set it aside. Family dinners were always a source of tension. Vivian felt it was her duty to comment on every aspect of her daughter's life, from her choice of hairstyle to her career decisions. Her father, Alden, usually remained silent, trying to keep the peace at all costs. "You have a good, stable job, Marion," her mother repeated regularly. "That's rare these days. Your cousin Patricia is changing companies for the third time. No stability, no loyalty." Her mother didn't mention that with each change of company, Patricia had climbed the career ladder and now earned 3 times more than Marion. The stability that Vivian was so proud of actually meant stagnation. By 6:30, Marion was all set, a strict blue suit, minimal makeup, her hair pulled back into a neat bun. Her style had been the same for the last 10 years, like so much else in her life. The drive to Brightside Appliances took exactly 28 minutes in normal traffic. Marion parked in her usual spot at 7:15, 15 minutes before the start of the workday. Her silver sedan was as inconspicuous and reliable as she was. The office greeted her with the hum of air conditioners and the smell of fresh pastries from the break room. Someone had brought homemade muffins again. Marion headed for her desk, nodding to her colleagues. They respected her, but few could call themselves close friends, except for Yoren Page, who waved at her from her desk. "Early bird as always." Yoren smiled. "Have you seen the new memo?" "Not yet." Marion turned on her computer. "Anything important?" "Corporate restructuring. Again." Yoren rolled her eyes. "The third in 2 years. Looks like something's going on at the top." Marion opened her email and scanned the long letter from management. Between the lines, there was a sense of unease and uncertainty. Process optimization, efficiency improvements, staffing review, these corporate euphemisms usually meant layoffs. "Do you think it will affect our department?" asked Yoren, approaching Marion's desk. "It shouldn't," Marion replied, although her inner voice told her otherwise. "We just closed the quarter with an 18% increase over the target. It would be strange to cut us back." Yoren nodded, looking unconvinced. "You'd know. You're Calloway's right-hand woman, after all." She lowered her voice. "By the way, how's he been lately? Is it just me, or has he been more tense?" Marion thought about it. Fletcher Calloway, their department director, had indeed been acting strangely for the past few weeks. He had canceled 2 weekly meetings with her, something he had never done before, and had stopped inviting her to client lunches. "Maybe he's just busy with the restructuring," Marion suggested, not wanting to show her concern. The day went on as usual. Emails, phone calls, meetings. Marion oversaw 3 major projects in her department and always kept her finger on the pulse. 15 years at Brightside Appliances had made her an indispensable employee. She knew all the processes, had connections in all departments, and could put together a presentation for the board of directors with her eyes closed. Towards lunchtime, Fletcher Calloway himself stopped by her office, a tall man in an impeccable suit with graying temples and cold blue eyes. "Marion, do you have a minute?" he asked without entering the office. "Of course, Fletcher," she said, automatically straightening up and closing the document she was working on. "Remember that smart refrigerator project you mentioned at the last quarterly meeting?" He didn't look her in the eye. "Yes." Marion's heart skipped a beat. That project was her brainchild, an idea she had been nurturing for over a year, a line of refrigerators with advanced artificial intelligence capable of analyzing contents and suggesting recipes, tracking expiration dates, and automatically compiling shopping lists. "We've decided to shelve it," Fletcher said, finally looking at her. "The board believes that now is not the time for risky innovations. We need to focus on our existing products." Marion felt something break inside her. This was the fourth project of hers that the company had shelved. In reality, it meant the idea would simply be buried. "I understand," she replied in an even voice. "Although market research showed good potential—" "This is a decision from above, Marion," Fletcher interrupted her. "Oh, and one more thing. We're getting a new employee on Monday, Reed Harlow. He'll be working on strategic planning. I'd like you to brief him on our main projects." "Sure." Marion nodded, feeling a chill in her stomach. Strategic planning was part of her job. Why did the department need another strategist? Fletcher left, and Marion sat staring at her computer screen. Her smart refrigerator project could take the company to the next level. She was sure of it. 3 months of research, dozens of meetings with engineers and marketers, detailed financial projections. None of it mattered now. Marion looked at the photo on her desk. It was her on her first day at the company 15 years ago, young, with sparkling eyes, full of hope. She was 21 at the time and had just received her bachelor's degree in marketing. Brightside Appliances was a growing company with ambitious plans. Marion started as a secretary, but quickly showed her potential and began climbing the career ladder. 15 years later, much had changed. The company had grown, become more conservative and bureaucratic. And Marion herself. She had reached the position of middle manager and seemed to be stuck there. Her last promotion was 4 years ago, and since then, despite all her efforts and ideas, nothing had changed. Marion spent her lunch break at her desk, scrolling through her newsfeed and trying not to think about the blocked project. Her phone vibrated. Another message from her mother. "Don't forget to buy wine for dinner. Dry red, not like last time." Vivian Thorne had a special talent for making Marion feel incompetent in any situation. Not like last time. That phrase had haunted Marion since childhood. No matter what she did, homework, college, work, her mother always found something to criticize. "Marion, you haven't forgotten that the industry conference in Atlanta is in 2 weeks, have you?" Yoren's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. "Conference?" Marion was momentarily confused. "Oh, yes, of course. The annual conference on innovation in consumer electronics." "Are you going? You weren't there last year." Yoren sat down on the edge of the table. "Fletcher usually attends these events himself." Marion shrugged. "But yes, I plan to go this year. I want to stay on top of the latest trends." In truth, Marion wanted more. She felt stuck, that her ideas and potential weren't being fully utilized at Brightside Appliances. The conference could be a chance to broaden her horizons, maybe even find new opportunities. The rest of the day was spent on routine work. Marion checked reports, held 2 meetings with her team, and prepared a presentation for Monday's meeting. She did all this on autopilot, her mind far away. By 6 o'clock, most of the employees had left, but Marion stayed behind as usual. She never left before 7, tacitly demonstrating her dedication to the company. A silly habit that, as she now realized, had led to nothing. Passing Fletcher's office, she noticed that the light was still on. The door was ajar, and she heard voices. Fletcher and someone else she didn't know. "She's a loyal employee, but we need fresh ideas, a new approach," Fletcher was saying. 15 years at one company is too long. People lose their flexibility, get stuck in old paradigms. "I understand," replied the unfamiliar voice. "When are you planning to restructure the department?" "Within a month. I want you to settle in first, get to know the processes. Then we'll start the reshuffle." Marion froze, unable to move. They were talking about her, it was obvious. After 15 years on the job, she was about to be replaced by someone with a new approach. Bitterness rose in her throat. She quietly moved away from the door and returned to her desk. Her hands trembled as she gathered her things. Fletcher's words echoed in her head. 15 years at one company is too long. The loyalty her mother had always emphasized turned out to be a disadvantage rather than an advantage. In the car, Marian allowed herself a moment of weakness. She slammed her hands on the steering wheel and took a deep breath, holding back tears. Then she started the engine and drove to the supermarket to buy wine for the family dinner. Red and dry, not like last time. Her parents' house greeted her with the smell of spices and the sounds of old jazz, which her father loved. Alden Thorne, a thin man with kind eyes and an apologetic smile, met his daughter at the door. "Mary," he was the only one who called her that, "you're just in time. The lasagna is almost ready." Marian hugged her father, smelling the familiar scent of cologne and flour. "Hi, Dad. I brought wine." Vivian emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. At 62, she looked younger, fit with perfect posture and a critical gaze that she now directed at her daughter. "You look tired," she said instead of a greeting. "Those circles under your eyes. Do you sleep at all?" "Hi, Mom," Marian said, handing her the bottle. "Dry red, just like you asked." Vivian studied the label and nodded, which in her case was the highest form of approval. "Set the table," she said, returning to the kitchen. "Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. Marian helped her father set the table. Family dinners always followed the same pattern. Her mother asked about work, criticized her life choices, and reminded her that at her age, it was time to start a family. Her father tried to smooth things over and steer the conversation toward neutral topics. "How was work, dear?" Alden asked when they sat down at the table. "Fine," Marian lied, serving herself some lasagna. Same old, same old." "Still working on that refrigerator?" Vivian asked, pouring wine. "The project's been put on hold," Marian admitted, struck by the accuracy of the term. "Management thinks it's too risky." "A wise decision," Vivian nodded. "In these uncertain times, it's best to stick to what's proven." Marian said nothing, though inside she was seething. Her mother had always supported the most conservative decisions and feared any kind of risk. "What's new at the office?" her father asked, trying to ease the tension. "Any interesting developments?" Marian paused for a moment. Should she tell him about the conversation she had overheard? That she was about to be fired or demoted after 15 years of impeccable service? That her ideas were systematically ignored? "We're getting a new employee on Monday," she said instead. "I'll be showing him the ropes." "It's great that you have so much experience," Alden remarked proudly. "I'm sure the young man will have a lot to learn from you." Vivian snorted. Or vice versa. Sometimes a fresh perspective is just what a stagnant department needs. Marian clenched her teeth. Her mother had never even worked in business. She had been an elementary school teacher her entire life. But for some reason, she considered herself an expert on corporate management. "Speaking of new opportunities," Vivian continued, "did you know that Eleanor Price's daughter just got a promotion? She's now the marketing director at that electronics company. And she's only 32. It was another tradition, comparing her to the children of friends and acquaintances who had supposedly achieved more. "That's wonderful for her," Marian replied dryly. "Pass the salt, please." Dinner continued in the same vein. Marian answered in monosyllables. Her mother criticized. Her father tried to smooth things over. It was a familiar scenario that Marian had grown tired of years ago, but she continued to endure out of a mixture of guilt, habit, and a desire not to hurt her father. After dessert, when her father had gone to the living room to watch the evening news, Vivian kept her daughter in the kitchen. "You don't look happy, Marian," she said, loading the dishwasher. "Is something going on that you're not telling me about?" For a moment, Marian wanted to open up, to tell her mother about her fears, about the conversation she had overheard, about the growing feeling that she was wasting her life. But years of experience told her that Vivian would offer no support, only criticism and sensible advice not to rock the boat. "Everything's fine, Mom," she replied. "I'm just tired. It's been a difficult week." "You need to get more rest," Vivian said in a tone that brooked no argument. And maybe think about changing your image. That bun makes you look older." Marian suppressed a sigh. "Thanks for the advice. I have to go. I have to get up early tomorrow." She said goodbye to her parents and stepped out into the cool evening air. As she got into her car, Marian felt the familiar mixture of relief and guilt. Relief that dinner was over, and guilt that she couldn't sincerely enjoy the time she spent with her parents. At home, she allowed herself a glass of wine and a long bath. Tomorrow was Saturday, but Marian planned to go to the office to finish her presentation and review materials for an upcoming conference. A typical weekend for a workaholic with no personal life, as Joran had once remarked. Sitting in the warm water, Marian reflected on her life. 15 years at the same company. 15 years of trying to be the perfect daughter for a mother who would never be satisfied. 15 years of putting her own desires and ambitions on hold. Maybe the conversation she overheard was a sign. Maybe it was time for a change. With this thought, she fell asleep, feeling for the first time in a long time not fear for the future, but a strange anticipation. The conference in Atlanta came sooner than Marian had expected. 2 weeks flew by in a whirlwind of work, meetings, and preparation. The new employee, Reed Harlow, turned out to be an ambitious 30-year-old graduate of a prestigious business school with a confident smile and a habit of interrupting his colleagues in meetings. On the first day of the conference, while checking into the hotel, Marian met Lawrence Sheridan, a representative of Novatech, Brightside Appliances' main competitor. "Marian Thorne?" He approached her in the lobby. "I've heard a lot about you." Lawrence Sheridan, Novatech. Tall, with piercing brown eyes and a welcoming smile, he extended his hand. "Likewise, Mr. Sheridan." Marian shook his hand, wondering where he knew her from. "Lawrence, please. I've followed your presentations at previous conferences. Your presentation on integrating smart technology into household appliances 2 years ago was impressive. It's a shame that Brightside didn't take advantage of your ideas." Marian felt a mixture of pride and bitterness. Someone had appreciated her work, but that someone was a representative of a competitor, not her own company. "Would you like to have coffee after today's sessions?" Lawrence suggested. "I'd like to discuss some ideas." Marian hesitated for a moment. Meeting with a representative of a competing company could be interpreted in different ways, but on the other hand, it was just a professional conversation at an industry conference. "I'd love to," she replied. "Let's meet in the lobby bar at 6. Returning from the conference in Atlanta, Marian felt a strange uneasiness. She couldn't get her conversation with Lawrence Sheridan from Novatech out of her head. He hadn't just praised her ideas, he'd offered her a job. Not directly, of course, but clearly enough for her to get the hint. "We value innovative thinking at Novatech, Marian, and we're not afraid to take risks when we see potential. Your concept of smart refrigerators is exactly the direction we're actively pursuing right now." She didn't give him a definite answer, saying she needed to think about it. But the very idea of change, the opportunity to start over where her ideas would be heard, the thought was both frightening and exciting. Monday morning began with a department meeting. Fletcher Calloway stood in front of the team, his usually perfectly ironed shirt looking slightly wrinkled and dark circles under his eyes, signs that were previously uncharacteristic of him. "As many of you already know," he began, avoiding Marian's gaze, "we have a new strategic planning specialist joining our team, Reed Harlow. Reed comes to us from Vertex Industries and has extensive experience in developing innovative products." Marian studied her new colleague closely. Reed was 5 or 6 years younger than her, in his early 30s, with an impeccable suit, a well-groomed beard, and the confident gaze of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. He nodded briefly to those present and smiled as if he were doing everyone a favor by being there. "Reed will be working on a new product line development strategy and overseeing several projects that Marian has been working on," Fletcher continued, and an awkward silence hung in the room. Marian felt all eyes turned to her. She kept a neutral expression, though inside she was seething. No one had discussed the transfer of her projects with her. No one had even warned her. "I'm sure Marian won't mind bringing Reed up to speed," Fletcher added with a fake smile. "Her experience with the company is invaluable." "Of course," Marian replied in an even voice. Always happy to help. After the meeting, she returned to her desk, trying to make sense of what had happened. A few minutes later, Yorin approached her, her eyes filled with concern. "What was that just now?" she whispered, sitting down on the edge of Marion's desk. "Is he taking your projects? All of them?" "It looks like it." Marion forced herself to shrug as if it didn't matter. "I guess they need some new blood." "That's not fair," Yorin exclaimed. "After everything you've done for the department, after 15 years of impeccable work." "Fairness and business rarely go hand in hand," Marion replied, surprised at her own calmness. Inside, she felt a strange numbness, as if what was happening was not happening to her, but to someone else. An hour later, Reed Harlow knocked on her office door. He entered without invitation, confidently took a chair opposite her and placed a thin folder on the table. "Marion, I'm glad to finally meet you in person," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Fletcher has told me a lot about you." "I hope it was all good," she replied, noting to herself that Fletcher had already discussed her with the new guy. "Of course. He says you're a pillar of the company," Reed said, as if being a pillar was something outdated and unprestigious. "I've looked through the project documentation and have a few questions, especially about the line of energy-efficient washing machines." For the next 2 hours, Marion answered questions, many of which she found elementary or deliberately provocative. Reed constantly questioned her decisions, offered improvements that would effectively undo months of her work, and did it all with an expression that suggested he was doing her a favor. "And one last thing," he said, when Marion was ready to escort him out of her office at any cost, "that project of yours with smart refrigerators that was put on hold." Marion tensed. It was her favorite project, her baby. "What about it?" "I looked through the materials. It's an interesting concept, albeit a little raw." He tapped his finger on the folder. "I think we could revive it, but with some significant changes. Make it more modern." "Modern," Marion repeated, feeling anger rising inside her. "And what exactly do you consider outdated in a concept I developed 3 months ago?" Reed didn't seem to notice her tone. "Oh, don't be offended, Marion. You have a great foundation, really. But technology is moving so fast." He spread his hands. "In any case, don't worry. I've already spoken to Fletcher, and he's given me the green light to rework the concept." Marion felt her breath catch in her throat. Her project, which Fletcher had called too risky, had suddenly been approved when it was proposed by the new favorite. "Good luck," she said, standing up and making it clear that the meeting was over. "If you have any questions, let me know." Reed nodded and left the office, leaving Marion alone with a growing feeling that she was being methodically squeezed out of the company she had devoted half her life to. During her lunch break, she received a message from Lawrence Sheridan. "How did the conference go? I hope you've had a chance to think about our conversation. Would you like to join me for dinner this Friday?" Marion stared at the message, feeling her heart beat faster. A week ago, she wouldn't have even considered meeting with a representative of a rival company. But now everything was different. "Dinner sounds good. Where and when?" she replied, surprised at her own boldness. Lawrence suggested meeting at 7 p.m. at River Garden, an upscale restaurant on the other side of town where the risk of running into colleagues from Brightside was minimal. After lunch, Marion tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept returning to the morning meeting, to Reed Harlow and his confident smile, to how easily Fletcher had handed him her projects. 15 years of loyalty to the company, and this was how they repaid her. At the end of the day, Fletcher called her into his office. He sat at his massive desk, shuffling through some papers, and didn't look up when she entered. "Sit down, Marion," he said, pointing to a chair. "How was your meeting with Reed?" "Productive," she replied neutrally. "I brought him up to speed on the projects." Good. Fletcher finally looked at her, but his gaze was wandering, evasive. "I wanted to discuss your role in light of the recent changes." Marion sat up straight, expecting the worst. "Reed will be taking over most of the strategic planning, as I mentioned, but I have a new assignment for you," he said, sliding a folder toward her. "We need to review our manufacturing cost structure. The board is demanding a 10% reduction in expenses in the next quarter." Marion took the folder, feeling her insides drop. From strategic planning and new product development to cost-cutting, This wasn't just a demotion, it was a sign that her career at Brightside was coming to an end. "I understand," she said calmly. "When do you need results?" "In 2 weeks. And, Marion—" Fletcher paused as if searching for the right words. "I know these changes may seem unexpected, but this is business, nothing personal." Nothing personal is a phrase they use when it's very personal, Marion thought, but she said aloud, "Of course, Fletcher, I'm a professional. The task will be completed on time." She left his office with her back straight and her head held high, even though she was seething with resentment and anger inside. She had given the company everything for 15 years, her time, her ideas, her youth. And in return, she received a demotion and the prospect of dismissal. When she got home, Marion didn't check her work email as usual. Instead, she poured herself a glass of wine, turned on some relaxing music, and tried to unwind. But thoughts of work, of Reed, of Fletcher, wouldn't leave her alone. The phone rang. Her mother's name lit up on the screen. Marion wondered for a moment whether to answer, but then sighed and accepted the call. "Hello, Mom?" "Marion, you didn't call back yesterday," Vivian said reproachfully. "I left you 2 messages." "I'm sorry, I was busy," Marion lied. In fact, she just didn't want another conversation full of criticism and unsolicited advice. "What was so important?" Vivian asked. "Work again? You work too much, Marion. It's not healthy." Marion suppressed a bitter laugh. Vivian had been telling her for years about the importance of a stable job, and now she was criticizing her for being a workaholic? "There are some changes at work," she said, deciding not to go into details. "A new employee, a redistribution of responsibilities. I hope you haven't been demoted?" Her mother's voice sounded alarmed, not for her daughter, but for the family's status among their acquaintances. "Not exactly," Marion replied evasively, "just different tasks." "Good," Vivian seemed to calm down. "Stability is the most important thing, especially at your age. You know, Margaret's daughter recently changed jobs, and now she's so stressed out. You have everything figured out. Everything is familiar. That's so important." Marion listened to her mother's familiar speech about the advantages of stability, about how important it was to stay in the boat, to remain in familiar territory. In the past, these words had reassured her, made her feel that she had chosen the right path. Now they seemed like chains holding her back. "Mom, what if I want to change?" Marion asked suddenly, surprising herself. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What nonsense, Marion." Vivian's voice became sharp. "What change? You have a good job at a reputable company, 15 years of experience. In this day and age, that's gold, not like those job hoppers. But what if they don't appreciate me there?" Marion felt the words spill out. "What if I can find a place where my ideas will be heard? Is this all those modern self-help books you've been reading?" Vivian was clearly getting angry. "Marion, in the real world, you have to be grateful for what you have. Your father worked at the same school for 40 years and never once regretted it. And every day he came home a little more worn out," Marion thought, but said aloud, "I'm just thinking, Mom. Nothing specific." "That's good." Vivian seemed to calm down. "By the way, we're having dinner this Saturday. Eleanor is coming with her new husband and Patricia. You'll come, won't you?" Marion suppressed a groan. Patricia was another reason for her mother to compare and criticize her. "I'll try," she replied evasively. "Don't just try, come," Vivian snapped. "Family is the most important thing, Marion. Remember that." After talking to her mother, Marion felt drained. Vivian always knew how to suck all the energy out of her and make her doubt her own decisions. Maybe her mother was right. Maybe she should be grateful for what she had and not take any risks. But then she remembered Reed Harlow stealing her ideas and Fletcher avoiding her gaze when he essentially demoted her, and the contrast with Lawrence Sheridan, who saw her as a valuable specialist whose ideas were worth listening to. Marion opened her laptop and began browsing the Novatech website. Their latest products, corporate philosophy, employee reviews, everything spoke of a company that wasn't afraid of innovation, valued its people, and thought about the future rather than clinging to the past. She found Lawrence's profile, Director of Innovation, with an impressive resume and several patents to his name, a man who understood the value of new ideas. Marian closed her laptop and walked over to the window. The city spread out before her, the lights of the skyscrapers twinkling in the evening darkness. Somewhere out there, in one of those buildings, could be her new future, if she had the courage to choose it. On Friday, Marian spent the day working on the task Fletcher had assigned her, finding ways to cut costs. It was humiliating work for someone of her caliber, but she did it thoroughly and professionally. Part of her still hoped that this was a temporary demotion, that the company would come to its senses and give her back her old responsibilities, but she knew that was unlikely. At 6, she began getting ready for dinner with Lawrence. Instead of her usual office suit, she wore an elegant dark blue dress, let her hair down, and applied brighter makeup than usual. Looking in the mirror, Marian was surprised to see that she looked younger and more energetic. The river garden was exactly as she had expected. Elegant but not pretentious, with a magnificent view of the river and live music. Lawrence was already waiting for her at the table. "Marian," he stood up to greet her, and she noticed that he looked even better than he had at the conference, a dark gray suit that fit his tall figure perfectly, light stubble, and a warm smile. "You look stunning." "Thank you," she said, feeling slightly embarrassed. It had been a long time since anyone had complimented her. "It's very beautiful here." "I'm glad you like it." Lawrence helped her sit down and motioned to the sommelier. "I took the liberty of ordering wine. I hope you like red." The dinner went surprisingly smoothly. They talked about work, new trends in the industry, and the latest technological innovations. Lawrence turned out to be not only a professional but also an interesting conversationalist. He traveled, was passionate about jazz and contemporary art, and read books that Marian had wanted to read for a long time but had put off because of work. "You know, I have to admit," Lawrence said as they moved on to dessert, "this dinner isn't exactly informal." Marian tensed up. "Really?" "Yes." He looked her straight in the eye. "Marian, I've been following your career for some time now. Your conference presentations, your ideas, it all shows that you're an outstanding professional. And I don't understand why Brightside doesn't appreciate you more." Marian felt the blood rush to her cheeks, partly from embarrassment at the compliment, partly from the fact that Lawrence seemed to know about her situation at the company. "Novatech could offer you something more," Lawrence continued. "Not just a job, an opportunity to realize your ideas, like that smart refrigerator project that Brightside shelved. You could bring it to life here." Marian took a sip of wine, trying to collect her thoughts. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you an opportunity." Lawrence smiled. "The position of Director of Product Innovation, your own team, freedom to develop new concepts, and of course, compensation commensurate with your current salary, significantly higher." The offer was tempting, so tempting that it seemed unreal. "Why me?" Marian asked. "Novatech must have talented people." "Of course they do," Lawrence nodded, "but none of them have your experience with Brightside. No one knows their processes, their customers, their strengths and weaknesses like you do. Plus your ideas, they're really innovative, Marian. That's the kind of approach we're looking for." "You want me to spy on Brightside?" she asked bluntly. Lawrence laughed. "No, nothing like that. We want you to help us create products that are better than Brightside's. And your knowledge of their approach is just a bonus. No trade secrets, no spying, just fair competition." It sounded reasonable, but Marian was still hesitant. 15 years at one company had created a kind of dependency, a corporate Stockholm syndrome. "I need to think about it," she said. "Of course," Lawrence nodded. "I understand that this is a big decision, especially after so many years at Brightside. But, Marian," he covered her hand with his, "sometimes loyalty has to be mutual. You gave them 15 years and they repaid you with—" "What?" The question hung in the air, painful and precise. How had Brightside repaid her for her years of devotion? With a demotion? By ignoring her ideas? By hiring a young upstart for a role that should have been hers by right? Lawrence didn't press her, giving her time to think. They spent the rest of the evening talking about more neutral topics, the city, travel, books, but the offer remained in the air, tempting and frightening at the same time. When Lawrence walked her to the taxi, he handed her his business card. Think about my offer, Marion. Take your time. I'll wait for your decision. At home, lying in bed, Marion turned Lawrence's business card over in her hands. Moving to a rival company would not just be a change of job, it would be an act of betrayal in the eyes of Brightside. She had been a model of loyalty for 15 years, and now she was going to throw it all away? On the other hand, hadn't they been the first to betray her? Hadn't they ignored her ideas, demoted her, pushed her into the background in favor of a newcomer with a big name? Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Be grateful for what you have. Stability is the most important thing. But was that really true? What if stability was just another word for stagnation? What if her mother had been afraid of change her whole life and was now trying to instill that fear in her daughter? Marion got out of bed and walked over to the closet. On the top shelf, in a box of mementos, was her first business card from Brightside Appliances. Marion Thorne, marketing assistant. She remembered how proud she was of that card, how she showed it to her parents, how she dreamed of a career in a company that seemed perfect to her at the time. 15 years later, she was still at the same company, but now her tiny office felt like a cage, and her colleagues' fake smiles seemed like masks hiding indifference or even contempt. Her phone vibrated. A message from Joran. How was your evening? Is he cute? Marion smiled. Joran was sure she had been on a date, and Marion didn't correct her. In a way, it was a date with her possible future. Better than I expected, she replied to her friend. He offered me something interesting. Ooh! Joran exclaimed. Details! I hope it's something naughty. Marion laughed. Not what you're thinking. I'll tell you when I see you. She put her phone down and looked at Lawrence's business card again. Director of Product Innovation, his own team, freedom to act. After years of her ideas being ignored, it sounded like a dream. But there was another factor she didn't want to think about, but which kept creeping into her mind. Lawrence Sheridan as a man. His attention, his compliments, his touch on her hand. It all awakened feelings that had long been dormant. After her divorce 5 years ago, Marion had hardly dated, throwing herself into her work. And now this intelligent, attractive, successful man was showing interest in her, even if it was professional. Don't be silly, Marion, she told herself. It's a business offer, nothing more. But even if that was the case, didn't she deserve a chance at a new beginning? The alarm clock rang at 5:30 as usual. Marion reached for the button as usual. But today, everything felt different. Over the weekend, she had made up her mind and called Lawrence. The contract with Novatech was signed on Sunday evening. She put on her best burgundy suit. Today, she planned to hand in her resignation. 2 weeks of work, and she would be free for a new beginning. The office greeted her with its usual buzz. Joran, noticing her friend, immediately came over. Did you do it? She whispered, referring to accepting the offer. Marion nodded, and Joran hugged her tightly. I'm so happy. It's their loss, not yours. When are you going to tell Fletcher? Today, Marion replied, turning on her computer. As soon as I gather my courage. But fate had other plans. A message arrived from Fletcher's assistant. Mr. Calloway is expecting you in his office at 10 o'clock sharp. At 10 o'clock sharp, Marion knocked on the door. To her surprise, not only Fletcher was there, but also Reed Harlow and an unfamiliar woman in a strict suit. Ah, Marion, come in, Fletcher said without getting up. Have a seat. This is Helena Grayson from Human Resources. Marion felt a chill run down her spine. The presence of HR never boded well. Good morning, she said. How can I help you? Fletcher folded his hands, feigning regret he clearly didn't feel. Marion, I asked you here to inform you of some changes. As you know, the company is undergoing restructuring, and the board of directors has decided to optimize the workforce. Marion nodded silently, already guessing where this was going. As a result, Fletcher continued, avoiding her gaze, your position has been eliminated. We are forced to terminate your contract effective immediately. Even though she had been planning to leave, his words hit her like a slap in the face. 15 years. And she wasn't even given the chance to leave on her own terms. I understand, she said calmly. Helena will explain the details of your severance package, he continued. We will, of course, provide excellent references for future employment. Reed nodded with false sympathy. Your experience at Brightside will undoubtedly be valuable to many companies. Not a word of thanks for 15 years. No mention of her contribution, just a cold, businesslike dismissal. I take it you want me to clear out my office today? Marian asked in a professional tone. Yes, Fletcher nodded. By the end of the day, security will help you with your things. Pack your things by the end of the day, he repeated. We are terminating your contract. Helena handed her a folder with documents. Everything is detailed here. Severance pay, insurance, pension contributions. If you have any questions, my business card is in there. Marian took the folder, feeling strangely numb. Part of her wanted to scream, to protest, but another part, the part that had already signed the contract with Novatech, felt almost gleeful satisfaction. I respect your decision, she said with a slight smile, looking Fletcher straight in the eye. Thank you for these years. Fletcher looked surprised by her calmness. Perhaps he had expected tears or outrage. Well, good luck in your future endeavors, he said, clearly wanting to end the conversation. Returning to her desk, she felt the stares of her colleagues. The news had spread quickly. Everyone already knew about her dismissal. Some looked at her with sympathy, others averted their eyes, as if afraid of being infected by her failure. Yoren was waiting at the table, her eyes full of indignation. I heard everything, she whispered, hugging her friend. What bastards! They didn't even let you work out your 2 weeks. After 15 years. It's okay, Yoren. Marian patted her friend on the back. Really? How can it be okay? I already found a new job, Marian said quietly. What? When? Where? At Novatech, she replied, enjoying the shock on her friend's face. I signed the contract yesterday. Yoren opened her mouth, then closed it and then laughed. Oh my God. Seriously? Their main competitor? Has Fletcher been informed? Not yet. Marian began packing her things into a box. And I'm not sure I'll tell him. Let him think he dealt me a crushing blow. And then he'll see you at the conference wearing a Novatech badge, Yoren continued. I'd pay to see his face. By lunchtime, the box was packed. A few photos, some books, a mug. That was all that remained of a decade and a half. Marian looked around, memorizing the office. Tomorrow, someone else would be sitting here. Perhaps Reed. A security guard, a young man, politely reminded her that he had to escort her to the exit, as if she could steal something or harm the company she had given so many years to. Wait a minute, said Yoren. I'll walk Marian to her car. They walked through the corridors for the last time. Marian felt a strange lightness, as if a heavy burden was lifting from her with every step. Are you okay? Yoren asked when they reached the elevator. Yes, Marian replied, and for the first time in a long time, it was true. In the parking lot, as she put the box in the trunk, Yoren suddenly hugged her. I'm going to miss you. Who's going to listen to my complaints about Fletcher now? We'll still see each other, Marian assured her. Maybe even more often. I won't stay late anymore. Promise? I promise. Marian hugged her friend. And you'll be the first to know how my day at Novatech goes. By the way, Yoren lowered her voice, that guy from Novatech, your new boss, is he cute? Marian laughed. Yoren, he's just a colleague. Yeah, right. Is he cute or not? Very, Marian admitted, blushing. But it doesn't matter. Of course it does, Yoren snorted. You've been looking at Fletcher's sour face for 15 years. You deserve someone nice-looking. They laughed, and the tension eased a little. Marian got into her car, waved to her friend, and drove out of the Brightside parking lot for the last time. A strange feeling came over her as the building disappeared from the rearview mirror. It was a mixture of nostalgia, sadness, relief, and freedom. For 15 years she had been Marian from Brightside. Now she had to become someone else. At home, she poured herself a glass of wine, even though it was only 2 o'clock. If she wasn't going to break the rules today, when would she? She took a sip and looked at her phone. She should call her parents, but the thought of her mother's reaction made her put it off. Instead, she dialed Lawrence's number. Marian? Is something wrong? I got fired today, she said. No warning. Pack your things by the end of the day. I'm sorry, he said, sounding genuinely sympathetic. That's unexpected. Not really. I saw it coming. I just didn't think it would happen so fast. How are you? Surprisingly good. Thanks to you and Novatek, of course. I don't know what I would have done without your offer. Then maybe it's for the best. Now you don't have to work out your 2 weeks. You can start tomorrow. Marian thought about it. The temptation to dive right back into work was strong, but something told her she needed a break. I'd like to take a week to get my thoughts in order before the new start. Of course. Rest, recharge. We'll be waiting for you next Monday. And if you want to have lunch or just talk, call any time. The phone rang again. This time it was her mother. Apparently the news had already reached her. Hello? Marian, is it true? Vivian's voice sounded agitated. Eleanor said her niece heard from someone that you were fired? Marian sighed. Rumors spread quickly. Yes, Mom, it's true. There was a pause on the other end of the line. My God, Vivian finally said. What have you done? Marian felt a wave of indignation. Of course, her mother immediately assumed she was to blame. It's nothing, Mom. The company is restructuring. My position has been eliminated. After 15 years? There must be something else. They don't fire loyal employees just like that. Apparently they do, Marian replied dryly. Corporate loyalty is a myth, Mom. They don't hold on to employees if they think they can find someone younger, cheaper, or with fresher ideas. Don't be silly. If someone does a good job, they're valued. What are you going to do now? It won't be easy to find a new job at your age. Marian grimaced. At 36, she was hardly old. Actually, Mom, I already found a new job. What? Where? When? At Novatek. I signed the contract yesterday. Novatek? Aren't they competitors? Wait a minute. You found a job before you were fired? Yes, I was planning to leave myself, but they beat me to it. Another pause. Marian could almost physically feel her mother trying to process the information. So you betrayed Brightside? Vivian finally asked. After everything they did for you? Marian laughed bitterly without joy. What did they do for me, Mom? Ignored my ideas? Passed me over for promotions? Gave my projects to some young upstart? And then they threw you out the door without a word of thanks for 15 years of work? Don't be dramatic, Marian. It's business, not a social gathering. But going to work for the competition, it looks like you're getting revenge. I'm not getting revenge, Mom. I just found a place where I'm appreciated, where my ideas matter. That's what you say now, Vivian snorted. What about in a year, 2 years, when they squeeze all the knowledge they can out of you and find someone younger? Marian closed her eyes and counted to 10. Typical mother, always seeing the worst. I'm not going to share confidential information about Brightside, she said evenly. And I got this job because of my skills and ideas, not my knowledge of my former employer. Be naive if you want to, but don't say I didn't warn you. I told you stability is the most important thing. You decided to take a risk, and now look at the result. Result: a new high-paying job and a chance to put her ideas into practice. Marian almost said it out loud, but held back. Thanks for your concern, Mom, but I'll be fine. Of course you will. Vivian's tone softened, but only slightly. You've always been stubborn, just be careful, Marian. Business can be brutal. I know, Marian recalled Fletcher's cold eyes. Believe me, I've learned that the hard way. After talking to her mother, Marian felt drained. Vivian hadn't even tried to support her, only criticizing and warning her. It was as if she wasn't a grown woman with 15 years of experience, but a naive girl. Her phone vibrated. A message from Yoren. How are you? Need some company? I can come over with ice cream and wine. Marian smiled. Now that was real support. I'd love to, just no ice cream. Wine is enough. While she waited for her friend, Marian unpacked the box of office supplies. Such insignificant items, but each one carried a piece of her history. 15 years isn't just a line on a resume, it's part of your identity. But now that chapter was closed. Unceremoniously, without warning, by someone else's will. Pack your things by the end of the day. The phrase that closed a decade and a half of her life. The doorbell interrupted her thoughts. Yoren stood on the threshold with 2 bottles of wine and a box of pizza. I know you said no ice cream, but I thought pizza was always a good idea." "Great idea," Marian agreed, hugging her friend. "Thanks for coming." They settled into the living room, poured wine, and opened the pizza. Joran was exactly what Marian needed right now. No criticism, no advice, just a friendly shoulder and understanding. "So," Joran said, raising her glass, "to a new beginning." "To a new beginning," Marian agreed, "and to the end of 15 years at a company that wasn't worth it." The week before she started at Novatech flew by faster than Marian had expected. For the first time in many years, she had time just for herself. No reports, no phone calls, no endless meetings. She slept in, read 2 books she had been putting off for months, cleaned her apartment from top to bottom, and even went for a massage. Of course, her mother called almost every day, insisting on knowing whether Marian had changed her mind and understood what she was doing. Vivian turned her daughter's departure from Brightside into a personal tragedy, as if Marian had betrayed not a corporation she didn't care about, but family values. "You're too impulsive, Marian," Vivian said in their last phone conversation. "Going to work for the competition is like publicly declaring that you're an unreliable employee." "Mom, I worked at the same company for 15 years, Marian replied wearily. "Hardly anyone would call that impulsive. But leaving now, when the economy is so unstable—" "I didn't leave, Mom. I was fired, remember?" Vivian fell silent for a moment, as if this information didn't fit into her worldview. "Of course, but you understand that they wouldn't have fired you if you weren't looking for another job." Marian struggled not to laugh at the absurdity of the statement. "Mom, they didn't know I was looking for another job. No one knew except Joran." "Trust me, you can sense these things," Vivian said confidently. "Management intuitively knows when an employee isn't completely loyal." Marian decided not to argue. Arguing with her mother was like banging her head against a wall, painful and pointless. Standing in front of the mirror, getting ready for her first day, she caught herself thinking that her mother's words had penetrated deeper than she would have liked. What if Lawrence used her to get information about Brightside? What if her colleagues looked at her suspiciously, like a defector? Marian took a deep breath, pushing away the unwelcome thoughts. Enough of listening to her mother's voice in her head. It was time to start trusting herself. She chose a dark green suit that she had never worn at Brightside. It seemed too bright there. She let her hair down instead of wearing it in her usual bun. She added gold earrings that she usually saved for special occasions. Novatech's head office was located in a modern glass and concrete building in the city's business district. Inside, everything was completely different from Brightside. Instead of closed offices and narrow corridors, there were open spaces, lots of light, and live plants. Employees did not sit in their cubicles. They socialized in informal areas and worked at large tables. "Marian," Lawrence spotted her at the reception desk and immediately headed toward her. "Glad you made it. How was your week off?" "It went by surprisingly fast," she replied, shaking his hand. "But productive." "Great. Ready to conquer new heights?" Marian smiled. At Brightside, no one talked about conquering heights. It was always about meeting expectations and staying on track. More than ready. Lawrence led her through the office, introducing her to her colleagues along the way. Marian tried to remember their names and positions, but there were too many, and she soon lost track. "Here's your place," Lawrence said, pointing to a spacious corner area with a large desk and a panoramic window. "Or, more accurately, one of your places. We have a flexible approach to workspace." Marian looked around. There were no partitions separating her from the others, no gray walls. Just a modern desk, an ergonomic chair, and a stunning view of the city. "Do you like it?" Lawrence asked, watching her reaction. "Very much," Marian replied sincerely. "It's so different from what I'm used to." "That's the whole point," Lawrence nodded. "We try to make the physical space reflect our philosophy. Openness, collaboration, no unnecessary barriers. We have a meeting with your new team at 10, but for now, make yourself at home." The young woman at the next desk waved. "Welcome to the madhouse. The first few days can be overwhelming, but you'll get used to it quickly. My name is Clara." Clara was the complete opposite of Marian's serious colleagues at Brightside. A bright dress instead of a strict suit, a short haircut with shaved temples, and an open smile instead of polite restraint. All projects are transparent here, Clara explained, showing her the internal systems. Any employee can see what other departments are working on. This helps avoid duplication of effort and encourages collaboration. Marian could hardly imagine such a thing at Brightside, where each department jealously guarded information about its projects. At 10, Lawrence returned to take her to a meeting with the team. They walked into a spacious meeting room with a huge screen on the wall and unusual chairs that looked more like home furniture than office chairs. "Team," Lawrence announced when everyone had gathered, "this is Marian Thorne, our new Director of Product Innovation. Marian, meet the people who will be helping you change the world of consumer electronics." There were 7 people in the room, 4 men and 3 women, all of different ages. They introduced themselves one by one. Alex, User Experience Specialist; Jaden, Development Engineer; Naomi, Marketing Research Specialist; Victor, Technical Designer; Sophia, Sustainability Expert; Marcus, Head of Manufacturing; and Zoe, Artificial Intelligence Specialist. "This is your dream team," Lawrence said. "The best people we could find, and now they're yours." Marian felt a lump rise in her throat. At Brightside, she had never had her own team. She had always been part of someone else's. "I'm very excited to meet all of you," she said, trying to sound confident. "I'm sure together we can create something amazing." "We've heard all about your smart refrigerator concept," said Zoe. "Lawrence gave us the basics. It sounds amazing. And very relevant from a sustainability perspective," added Sophia. "Reducing food waste is one of the key environmental issues we face today." Marian couldn't believe her ears. Her project, which Brightside had deemed too risky, was already generating enthusiasm here, even though the team hadn't even seen the full concept. "I have a detailed presentation," she said, "but it's on my personal laptop. I can show it to you tomorrow if—" "Why not now? I can send someone to get your laptop if you don't mind." "No, don't bother," Marian said, taking a flash drive out of her bag. "I have a backup with me." Lawrence smiled, and Marian suddenly realized that he wasn't surprised. He expected her to be professional and prepared. The next 2 hours flew by. Marian presented her concept, not just a smart refrigerator, but an entire ecosystem integrated with other kitchen appliances, mobile devices, and food delivery systems. A refrigerator that not only tracked expiration dates and suggested recipes, but could also order missing ingredients, calculate the optimal amount of food for a family, and adapt suggestions to dietary restrictions. The team listened with genuine interest, asked questions, and offered ideas for improvement. No one said, "It's too complicated," or "The market isn't ready." On the contrary, everyone was enthusiastic. "I think we could add a food allergen recognition feature," suggested Zoe. "With modern computer vision algorithms, it's entirely feasible." "What about integration with fitness apps?" added Alex. "So the refrigerator can suggest foods and recipes that not only match preferences but also health goals." Ideas flowed one after another, complementing and expanding the initial concept. This is what real teamwork should look like. Not competition for recognition, but sincere cooperation toward a common goal. "I think that's enough for the first day," Lawrence finally said. "Everyone has their own tasks to do. Marian, take today and tomorrow to look around and learn our processes. We can start working on the project in earnest on Thursday." Everyone began to disperse, but each lingered for a moment to greet Marian again and express their enthusiasm for working together. "Impressive, isn't it?" Lawrence asked when they were alone. "Very," Marian admitted. I didn't expect such a welcome." "What did you expect?" Marian thought for a moment. To be honest, she had expected skepticism, distrust, and the need to prove her competence. "I don't know. It's just, everything was different at Brightside." "Brightside is a thing of the past," Lawrence shrugged. "Hierarchical structures, closed communication, a culture of mistrust, those are all outdated approaches. We value ideas and the people who generate them, not seniority or position in the hierarchy." Lunch on the roof was another surprise. Instead of a faceless corporate cafeteria, there was a cozy space with panoramic windows, live plants, and a varied menu. "Wow!" Marion couldn't help exclaiming as she looked out over the city from above. "That's impressive. We believe that caring about employee comfort pays off handsomely," Lawrence said. "Happy people work better, are more creative, and are more efficient." Over lunch, they talked not only about work, but also about their personal interests, books, and travels. Marion learned that Lawrence was into rock climbing, played the saxophone, and collected vintage records. He, in turn, was impressed by her knowledge of cuisines from different countries. When she returned to her desk, Marion found a welcome gift, an elegant diary with the Novatech logo and a card signed by all the members of her new team. "Welcome to the family. We are so glad you are with us. Together we will create the future." Marion pressed the card to her chest, feeling tears well up in her eyes. 15 years at Brightside, and she had never felt so valued on her first day. She spent the rest of the day studying internal company documents, familiarizing herself with current projects and Novatech's history. By the end of the day, Marion felt like she was already starting to find her bearings in her new environment. At home, she noticed the flashing light on her answering machine. 3 messages, all from her mother. Marion sighed. She knew she would have to call back sooner or later, but right now she wanted to savor the euphoria of her first day. Instead, she dialed Joran's number. "So, how was it?" her friend asked, without preamble. "Tell me everything!" Marion laughed. "It was amazing, Joran. The open space, the friendly colleagues, and, you won't believe this, my own team, who are really excited about my ideas." "Wow!" Joran exclaimed. "Companies like that exist? I thought they were a myth, like unicorns." They talked for almost an hour. Marion told her everything about her workplace with a view of the city, the rooftop cafe, meeting her team, and the support for her project. "How's Lawrence?" Joran asked suggestively. "Still as handsome as ever?" Marion felt herself blush. "Joran, he's my boss." "So what? It's not against the law," her friend laughed. "But seriously, does he treat you well?" "More than that," Marion admitted. He really values my ideas, and not just that. We had lunch together, and he asked me about my hobbies, what I like to read. Fletcher has never once asked me about my life outside of work in 15 years. "Wow," Joran said. "That sounds too good to be true. Maybe he has some ulterior motive?" Marion thought about it. Joran's words reminded her of the doubts her mother had planted in her mind. "I don't know," she replied honestly. "Maybe. But right now, I don't care. I feel valued, Joran." For the first time in a long time. After talking to her friend, Marion decided to listen to her mother's messages after all. As she had expected, Vivian was concerned and demanded an immediate report on her first day. Reluctantly, she dialed her parents' number. "Hello?" Vivian's voice sounded tense with a hint of accusation. "Hi, Mom. Sorry I didn't call back earlier. It's been a busy day." I was starting to worry. "How was your first day at that new company?" Even over the phone, Marion could sense her mother avoiding the name Novatech, as if it were something indecent. "Great, Mom. Everyone is very friendly. The office is modern, and I have my own team." "Your own team? On your first day? Isn't that a bit hasty?" "No, Mom, it's not too fast. They hired me specifically as a department head. It's normal for me to have a team." "And what do they want from you? What information about Brightside?" Marion rolled her eyes. Of course, her mother couldn't just be happy for her. "Nothing, Mom. They're interested in my ideas, not Brightside secrets." "That's what they say now," Vivian snorted. "But trust my experience, dear. They're just using you. Once they get what they want, they'll find a reason to get rid of you." Marion sighed deeply, fighting her irritation. "Mom, I appreciate your concern, but I'm a grown woman, and I can assess the situation for myself. And right now, the situation is that I'm finally in a place where my ideas are valued." "Naive girl," Vivian sighed. "Well, I hope you're right. But when things go wrong, don't say I didn't warn you." After the conversation, Marion felt devastated. Why did her mother always see only the negative? Why couldn't she just be happy for her daughter? She poured herself a glass of wine and went out onto the balcony. The city twinkled with lights below, as bright and full of possibilities as her new career. For the first time in many years, Marian felt that she had a future, a chance to fulfill her potential, and no doubt sown by her mother could spoil that feeling. Starting tomorrow, she decided, looking up at the starry sky, I'm going to set boundaries. I won't let anyone, not my mother, not anyone else, make me doubt myself anymore. Enough is enough. With that thought, she finished her wine and went to bed, already looking forward to a new day at Novatech, a place where her ideas were not only heard but valued, a place where she could finally be herself. 6 months at Novatech flew by like a single day. Marian was completely immersed in her work on the smart refrigerator project, which now had an official name, EcoFrost. Her team worked smoothly and efficiently, bringing to life ideas that once seemed like nothing more than beautiful dreams. The prototype was almost ready, and the company's management decided to present it at the annual Future Tech Innovation Technology Exhibition, which was to take place in 2 weeks. It was the largest industry event, bringing together representatives of all leading companies, including, of course, Brightside Appliances. "Are you ready to present EcoFrost to the world?" Lawrence asked, peeking into Marian's office. Over the past few months, their relationship had grown from a purely professional one to a friendly one, and perhaps even something more, although both were careful to maintain professional boundaries. "Almost," she replied, looking up from her computer screen. "I just need to finish the presentation and do some final testing on the prototype." "I'm sure it'll be perfect," Lawrence said, moving closer to look at the screen, which was displaying a file with consumer test results. "All the preliminary feedback has been amazing. People are raving about the product recognition and automatic shopping list features." Marian smiled, feeling a surge of pride. This was her project, her baby, and now it was ready to change the home appliance market. "I still can't believe we've come so far so fast, from concept to working prototype," she admitted. "It would have taken years at Brightside, and that's assuming the project would have been approved at all." That's the difference between companies that are stuck in the past and those that look to the future," Lawrence shrugged. "By the way, I heard that Brightside will also be at the show with a new line of refrigerators." Marian tensed. She tried not to think about her former colleagues, about Fletcher, about Reed Harlow, who had probably taken her place. But the thought of seeing them at the show evoked mixed feelings. "Are you okay?" Lawrence noticed her reaction. "Yes, of course," she replied quickly. "It'll just be strange to see them again. After they rejected your ideas and then threw you out the door?" Lawrence finished for her. "I'd feel some satisfaction if I were you, imagining their faces when they see what you've created here." Marian smiled. "I admit, that thought has crossed my mind a couple of times." "Only a couple of times?" Lawrence laughed. "You're too kind, Marian Thorne." The Future Tech exhibition was held in a huge exhibition center in the city's business district. Companies from all over the world presented their latest developments at stands decorated with the most modern technologies and design solutions. The Novatech stand stood out from the rest with its minimalist yet elegant design, interactive screens, and, of course, the EcoFrost prototype at the center of the exhibition. The smart refrigerator with a transparent front panel that allows you to see the contents without opening the door, a touch screen, and a built-in artificial intelligence system attracted the attention of everyone passing by. Marian was standing at the stand explaining the functionality of EcoFrost to a group of interested visitors when she noticed a familiar figure out of the corner of her eye. Fletcher Calloway, in his usual impeccable suit, was slowly strolling through the exhibition, stopping at various stands. He hadn't noticed her yet, but he was clearly heading toward the Novatech exhibit. Marian felt her heart beat faster. Over the past 6 months, she had almost convinced herself that she had completely overcome the hurt and disappointment of how her career at Brightside had ended. But the sight of Fletcher suddenly stirred up feelings she thought she had long since buried. She finished her presentation to a group of visitors and turned to Lawrence, who had just approached the booth. "Fletcher's here," she said quietly. "He's coming this way." Lawrence glanced over her shoulder and nodded. "Do you want me to deal with him?" "No," Marian replied firmly. I can handle it. As if sensing their conversation, Fletcher looked up and saw Marian. His face showed surprise, which quickly gave way to a neutral expression. He nodded to her and continued toward the Novatech booth. Marian, he said as he approached. What a surprise. Hardly a surprise, Fletcher, she replied calmly. Novatech announced my appointment 6 months ago. Don't you read industry news? Fletcher frowned slightly. Of course I knew you got a job here. I just didn't expect to see you in person. I'm in charge of the Eco-Frost project, Marian said, pointing to a prototype refrigerator. It's Novatech's major innovation this year. Fletcher looked closely at the refrigerator, and Marian noticed the change in his expression as he realized what he was looking at. This is the project you proposed to us? He asked, a hint of regret in his voice. That's right, Marian nodded. The one you deemed too risky and irrelevant for the market. The prototype has already passed all the tests, and we're starting production next quarter. Pre-orders have exceeded our most optimistic forecasts. Fletcher was silent, continuing to study the refrigerator. Marian noticed how his fingers turned white as he clenched the exhibition brochure. It looks like we made a mistake, he finally said. A strategic mistake. Those words, the closest thing to an apology she would ever get from Fletcher Calloway, gave Marian a strange sense of satisfaction. Not schadenfreude, but a feeling of validation that she had been right all along. Business is full of mistakes, Fletcher, she said. What matters is what we learn from them. He looked at her intently, as if seeing her for the first time. You've changed, he remarked. Yes, Marian agreed. I'm finally where my ideas are appreciated. At that moment, Lawrence approached them. Mr. Calloway, if I'm not mistaken? He extended his hand. Lawrence Sheridan, Director of Innovation at Novatech. Pleased to meet you. Fletcher shook the offered hand, but his gaze remained cold. Likewise, he said without much enthusiasm. Congratulations on the acquisition. Marian is undoubtedly a valuable asset. Oh, we know, Lawrence smiled. She changed our entire product development strategy. Thanks to her, we're 2 years ahead of the competition. It was said politely, but with a clear undertone that made Fletcher flinch slightly. Well, I won't keep you, he said, taking a step back. Good luck with the project. He was about to leave when Marian decided to ask the question that had been on her mind for a long time. Fletcher, she called after him. Why? Why did you decide to fire me after 15 years? He stopped and turned to her. It was a decision made by the board of directors, he replied, but his gaze avoided her eyes. Restructuring, cost optimization. Please, Marian interrupted. Enough corporate euphemisms. I deserve the truth. Fletcher paused, as if weighing whether to be honest. Finally, he sighed. Reed, he said. Reed Harlow. He was the chairman's protege, and he needed a position. Your position. I tried to keep you at the company, offered to transfer you to another position. A demotion, Marian clarified. Yes, Fletcher admitted. It was the best I could do in the situation. But when I found out you had been in contact with Novatech at the conference... Wait, Marian frowned. You knew about our conversation with Lawrence? Not specifically who, but I was informed that you had been talking to representatives of competitors. In that situation, the board decided it was best to part ways immediately. Marian shook her head, unable to believe her ears. So I wasn't fired because of restructuring, but because you were afraid I would go to the competition? In general, yes. Fletcher looked embarrassed for the first time in the entire conversation. The irony is, Marian said with a bitter smile, that I was actually planning to leave, but not because I wanted to hurt Brightside. It was because you didn't value my ideas, my contributions, my potential. You pushed me into the arms of your competitors, Fletcher. And now you have to live with the consequences of that decision. Fletcher looked at her for a long time, his eyes filled with the realization of his mistake. Good luck, Marian, he finally said. I mean that sincerely. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Marian and Lawrence standing by the booth. Are you okay? Lawrence asked quietly when Fletcher was out of sight. Surprisingly, yes, Marian replied, feeling a strange sense of relief. I finally got my answers. And you know what? I'm grateful to them. If they hadn't fired me, I would never have decided to make a change. Sometimes you have to lose something to gain something much greater. Lawrence smiled and gently squeezed her hand. You're an amazing woman, Marion Thorne. After the exhibition, which was a triumph for Novatech and for Marion personally, she decided to finally talk to her mother. Meeting Fletcher, his admission of his mistake, and the success of EcoFrost had given her the inner strength she had so lacked before. She arrived at her parents' house on Sunday for the usual family dinner. Her father, Alden, was delighted to see her. He was always happy to see his daughter. Her mother, Vivian, greeted her with her usual slight disapproval, noting that Marion had lost too much weight and looked tired. That new job is sucking the life out of you, Vivian said as she set the table. I always told you that stability is more important than career ambitions. Marion usually let such comments roll off her back, but today she was in a different mood. Actually, Mom, I feel great, she replied calmly. Our project was a huge success at the exhibition, and I've never been so happy with my work. Of course, everything seems wonderful now, Vivian dismissed her. But what about in a year? In 2? When they find someone younger with fresher ideas? Mom, Marion interrupted her. I'd like to talk to you after lunch. Seriously. Vivian looked at her daughter in surprise, unaccustomed to such a tone from her. About what? Everything, Marion replied simply. About us, our relationship, how we communicate. Alden, sensing the tension, hastened to intervene. Let's have dinner first, he suggested with a smile. I made your favorite roast, Mary. Lunch was tense. Vivian was unusually quiet, as if preparing for the conversation ahead. Marion ate quietly, mentally rehearsing what she was going to say. Alden tried to lighten the mood by talking about the weather and the news, but his attempts quickly came to nothing. After lunch, Marion helped clear the table and then suggested that her mother go out into the garden. It was a warm autumn day, and the apple trees planted by her father many years ago were laden with ripe fruit. So, Vivian began when they sat down on the garden bench, what did you want to talk about? Marion took a deep breath. Mom, I love you, she began. You're my mother, and I'll always be grateful to you for everything you've done for me. But I'm 36 years old, and I can't let you constantly undermine my confidence in myself and my decisions anymore. Vivian sat up straight, her face tense. What are you talking about? I've always wanted the best for you. I know, Marion nodded. I believe you really wanted what was best for me. But the way you expressed your concern, it always came with criticism, with doubts, with assumptions that I would do something wrong. I was just being realistic, Vivian objected. The world is cruel, Marion, especially to women. I wanted to prepare you for that. But instead of giving me the strength to face that cruelty, you just added your own, Marion said gently. Every time I came to you with a dream, a goal, an idea, you told me why it wouldn't work. Every time I was happy about something, you found a reason why I shouldn't be. And when I lost my job after 15 years, you didn't support me. You blamed me for it. Vivian opened her mouth to argue, but Marion raised her hand, asking her to listen. I met Fletcher at the exhibition, she continued. He admitted that firing me was a mistake. Our project, the one that Brightside rejected, was a hit at the exhibition. We're starting production next quarter, and analysts predict that it will change the home appliance market. I've made it, Mom. I was right in my aspirations, and I wish that just once, you could be happy for me, without reservations, without warnings that things could go wrong. Vivian's face reflected a struggle of emotions, surprise, confusion, maybe even a hint of pride, quickly suppressed by her usual anxiety. But I've always been happy for your successes, she said, though her voice sounded uncertain. It's just that I know success can be temporary, and I wanted you to be prepared for any twists and turns fate might throw at you. Being prepared for difficulties doesn't mean constantly expecting the worst. Marion shook her head. It means believing in yourself, in your ability to overcome obstacles, and you can't develop that belief when the person closest to you constantly tells you that you're not good enough, not smart enough, not careful enough. Vivian was silent, truly listening to her daughter for the first time in a long time. "I'm not asking you to change completely, Mom," Marian continued in a softer tone. "I know it's hard at your age, but I'm asking you to respect my boundaries. I'm a grown woman, and I make my own decisions. If I ask for advice, give it to me. But if I don't ask, please refrain from criticism and warnings. And most importantly, please learn to be happy for my successes instead of waiting for them to turn into failures." Tears glistened in Vivian's eyes, a rare sight for this always reserved woman. "I didn't realize I was hurting you," she said quietly. "I thought I was protecting you." "I know," Marian took her mother's hand, "and I'm grateful for your desire to protect me. But now I don't need protection, I need support. Can you give me that?" Vivian looked at her daughter for a long time, as if seeing her for the first time. Then she nodded slowly. "I'll try," she said. "I can't promise it will work right away. Old habits die hard, but I'll try." Marian smiled and hugged her mother tightly. This conversation was only the beginning of a long journey toward a healthy relationship, but it was an important first step. When she left her parents' house, she felt lighthearted, as if a weight had finally been lifted from her shoulders. She knew that her relationship with her mother would not change overnight, that there would be more difficult moments and conversations. But today, for the first time in her life, she had openly expressed her feelings, set boundaries, and asked for what she needed. It was an act of self-care, an act of self-respect. 3 weeks later, Marian stood on the stage of the Novatech conference hall, preparing to present EcoFrost to the press and the company's partners. The room was packed with journalists, investors, and retail chain representatives, all eager to see the innovation that had been the talk of the town since the exhibition. Lawrence and her team sat in the front row, all with equally proud smiles, and next to them, to Marian's surprise, sat her parents. Her father, as usual, with a warm, supportive smile, and her mother, unusually embarrassed, but with a clear desire to be there, to support her daughter at this important moment. Marian took a deep breath and began her presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen at Novatech, we believe that technology should not just improve our lives, it should make them more conscious, more environmentally friendly, more connected. EcoFrost is not just a smart refrigerator. It is a rethinking of our relationship with food, with consumption, with our everyday habits." She spoke confidently, passionately, with the sincere conviction that always distinguished her presentations. The audience listened attentively, many taking notes and nodding in agreement. When the presentation ended, the room erupted in applause. Lawrence was the first to stand up, and soon everyone in attendance was on their feet applauding Marian and her innovation. Looking at this scene, at the happy faces of her team, at Lawrence's pride, for the first time, genuine admiration in her mother's eyes, Marian felt tears welling up in her eyes. Just 6 months ago, she had been sitting in her office at Brightside, feeling underappreciated, unfulfilled, and dissatisfied. Just 6 months ago, Fletcher Calloway had coldly said, "Pack your things by the end of the day, we're terminating your contract." And it was those very words, oddly enough, that opened the door to a new and better life. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself," Marian thought, smiling through her tears of joy. Sometimes the most painful moments in our lives turn out to be turning points to something much better. Sometimes what seems like the end is actually just the beginning. She stepped off the stage to continued applause, and the first people to greet her were her parents. Her father hugged her with the same warmth as always. And her mother did something she hadn't done in many years. She hugged her daughter tightly, without restraint, and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Marian. I'm really proud of you." And at that moment, Marian realized that she had gained not only professional success, not only a job she loved and the opportunity to realize her ideas. She had gained something much more important,